Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, Israel unveiling a number of new coronavirus regulations as the economy continues to suffer from the pandemic's fourth wave. Meantime, the United Nations coming together at the General Assembly in New York while simultaneously coming apart over the controversial Durban IV Conference. And finally, what could bring people closer during a global pandemic faster than some healthy online competition? The Sharaka-NGO putting International Peace Day in check. To begin, Israel confirming over 8,500 new COVID infections overnight Tuesday, indicating a lower spread rate than in days past, but one that's still way too high. And Israeli authorities are still struggling to find a method for mitigating the virus's spread. 172,530 coronavirus tests conducted in Israel on Monday, at least 8,691 of which coming back positive, the spread rate at 5.12%. 710 people, meanwhile, in serious condition, 70% of whom are unvaccinated, and the death toll in Israel now hitting 7,567. Though despite the tragic figures, the rate of infection seemingly trending downwards again. The only problem, then, is keeping it that way. So the government announcing a number of initiatives. For one, from the medical perspective, the health ministry finally purchasing Regeneron, a drug shown to have potentially life-saving properties for mild and moderate COVID symptoms. Until a recent report on the matter, the drug was allegedly denied by HMOs due to its cost. Meanwhile, authorities officially launching a new GPS tracking system for the sake of quarantine enforcement. This after the program's pilot successfully ended in recent weeks. Tens of thousands of citizens receiving text messages from the Israeli police starting Sunday, with a link to provide the police with their GPS location. And should an individual choose not to opt into the program, police will increase monitoring activities in their area. Israel requires all travelers arriving from abroad to isolate for a week, after which they must present a negative PCR test. Israelis who've been vaxxed 3 times, twice in the past 6 months, or recently recovered from COVID are exempt. And finally, in a related program, Jerusalem now calling on the US and EU to adopt its Green Pass regulations with respect to Israelis traveling abroad. Under Israel's rules, as of October 3, Israelis who fail to get a booster shot 6 months after their second dose lose their Green Pass privileges, and without a Green Pass, citizens are considered unvaccinated. Israel is therefore asking that Europe and the United States likewise consider such individuals unvaxxed for the purposes of border entry eligibility. Now, speaking of travel, the fourth wave wreaking havoc on Israel's tourism industry. So while calling for stricter regulations for Israelis traveling abroad, the Israel Tourism Ministry is also looking to streamline and increase foreign visitation. Israel relaunching its pilot to allow foreign tourist groups from selected countries to enter Israel without quarantine. All visitors have to do to enter is get vaccinated and provide negative tests both before the flight and serologically upon arrival. Until now, only vaccinated foreigners with first-degree relatives in Israel were eligible for entry. The program was approved just a little too late for much of the high holiday season, however, which left otherwise overbooked hotels at just 70% occupancy at best. And this for the second year in a row. Meantime, Israel's El Al Airlines similarly feeling the pinch, and it's now presenting its latest plan for streamlining, including the sale of 16 aircraft and the laying off of 1,500 employees. Therefore, if approved, El Al's fleet would shrink from 45 to just 29 planes, with the remaining routes focusing on core European destinations and North America. As for the layoffs, 2,000 employees have already been laid off over the past year, and of the 4,000 still on payroll, 1,400 are on unpaid leave. The cutbacks could be a means to a better end, though, with many of the employees who are on the chopping block today back in the office in the near future. El Al is saying that they, quote, believe that the aviation sector will soon stabilize and most employees will be necessary again, end quote. For now, though, losses in revenue aside, these cuts made as part of aid negotiations opposite the finance and labor ministries in Israel. Some $50 million is on the table. Moving on, the United Nations General Assembly Leaders Meeting opening in New York this week, and over 100 world leaders in attendance, with many more participating remotely. Taking the spotlight, though, is new Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi, who took the opportunity to blast the United States and Israel. Raisi claiming again that Iran has no ambitions for nuclear weapons, that Washington is mistaken to believe that Tehran would crumble under sanctions, and that in general, the alleged era of American hegemony was over.
و هر گونه نقض حقوق ملت‌ها بیش از همه چیز صلح و امنیت جهانی را به مخاطره می‌افکند. خانم‌ها و آقایان، در سال گذشته دو تصویر تاریخ ساز شد. 6 ژانویه که به کنگره آمریکا مورد هجوم مردم آمریکا قرار گرفت و در آگوست که مردم افغان از هواپیمای آمریکایی به پایین پرتاب شدند. از کاپیتال تا کابل یک پیام به جهان مخابره می شود و آن نظام سلطه امریکا بی اعتبار است، چه در داخل و چه در خارج.
United States President Biden, on the other hand, playing off the withdrawal from Afghanistan as a success, while repeating commitments to end Trump's America First policy in favor of a new era of, quote, relentless diplomacy. But joining with the details is former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Dani Ayalon. Ambassador, it is a pleasure to have you back with us. Now, let's start with President Raisi's accusations that after the Capitol building invasion on January 6th and Afghanistan withdrawal, the U.S. has lost all credibility. Biden, in the meantime, of course, denying connection to the Capitol invasion and hailing the Afghanistan pullout as a success. How do you react?
Well, it's quite cynical and hypocritical for a dictator who has blood on his hands personally. The hanger from, or the butcher from Tehran, as he's called, presiding over a dictatorial state which is committing many crimes against humanity and continuing with illegal activities, especially with the nuclear program, the illegal nuclear program. For him to take on the United States, it's quite presumptuous, but it seems like on the one hand, there is some merit to the fact that with Afghanistan and with other, I would say, lapses in American foreign policy, we see that its deterrence and reputation is being tarnished and is used like third-rate dictators like Raisi to go against it. It will not make much of a real difference in the real world, because the UN, we have to remember, is just a show that has nothing to do with reality on the ground, and it really allows dictators to gain points vis-a-vis their own population.
So what do you expect to come out of Biden's policy of so-called relentless diplomacy? Do you think that it'll be successful?
Well, it may be successful only with one condition, where they have also a credible threat, a credible option that would go to other means if diplomacy fails. We know that the Iranians, especially, they heed very much to palpable threat. The only time they voluntarily, Aaron, suspended their nuclear program was in 2003, after the U.S. invaded Iraq. They were on their border, and they thought that they might be next. So without a real option, a military option, that may be veiled, the intention could be veiled, through diplomatic words. But if the Iranians understand that in no way the United States is willing to go to other options, then nothing will happen. Quite the contrary, Iran will gain the upper hand, as it's been doing so in the Vienna talks, right, which of course was suspended by Iran. It seems like Iran now has all the keys, holding all the cards. And again, if they won't be threatened in a real sense, I do not see much optimism going in that area.
All right, now I want to move on a little bit to American-Israel relations, because Biden, again, during his speech, he was promising to support Israel while pressuring for a two-state solution. And the United States administration has been consistent in claiming widespread support for Israel in general. But there's currently an argument in Washington over the military aid, specifically a $1 billion budget line item for Israel's Iron Dome system. Is support for Israel perhaps not as clear-cut as the Democrats or the Biden administration would like it to appear? Or do you think that maybe there's more to the story that I'm missing?
Well, I think if we drill down, we have to be more precise about it, Aaron, because it's not the Democratic Party that is against Israel.
Of course.
This is only a very specific element, and we can pinpoint it to about 4 or 5 members of Congress, headed by,
The squad, the so-called squad, yeah.
And the squad. And then they have maybe 1 or 2 more, Presley from Boston and others. But they are a very, very small group, but very vociferous. And unfortunately, what we see is that they have the capability to, in a way, threaten the silent majority of Democrats. And we do not see a counterweight by the Democrats that most of them continue to support Israel. Now, we have to be honest. Certainly, during the Obama years, we have had some falling out with the Democrats. But on top of that, there is this polarization between Democrats and the Republicans in America, which has nothing to do with us. And unfortunately, Israel has been caught, especially now, in this crossfire, of course, political crossfire between the Democrats and the Republicans. You see, Aaron, the squad, as we call them, they do not have the power, the political power, or the enough hands to derail any pro-Israeli resolution or vote in Congress. But again, why the Democrats did not want to include the special addition, assistance of $1 billion
or rather chose to remove it.
Why did they remove it? Because the Republicans were going to join force with those squads just in order to embarrass the Democrats and the administration.
Now, keeping with the United Nations, it's the 20th anniversary of the controversial World Conference Against Racism in Durban, South Africa, aka the Durban IV Conference. But after having repeatedly veered into open displays of anti-Semitism at the first 3 iterations, some 30-plus countries, including the United States, UK, Germany, France, and Canada, are now boycotting the event outright. With me to discuss, again, is former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Danny Ayalon. Danny, thanks for returning to us. Now, Israeli ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan, he thanked these 30-some nations for understanding that the Durban Conference is, quote, fundamentally rotten. And the first 3 conferences could easily be characterized this way. But why then do you think that we still have this conference? And would you agree with this description to begin with?
First of all, absolutely. And I would say it's really to the detriment of the South Africans and to the Durban inhabitants. Nice, charming South African city that has become now infamous or became a beacon of hatred and really the lowest kind of racism and anti-Semitism that is going to be associated with its name. We have to remember the first Durban conference 20 years ago exactly today was supposed to really fight all kinds of racism and xenophobia and Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. But again, like many other cases, it was hijacked by the Palestinians, their collaborators. They erased anti-Semitism, and actually they have turned the entire conference, which was going to be a feel-good conference, to go for something which is justice for all, human rights, liberty. They turn it into the most severe anti-Semitic tool against Israel and against Jews all over. And to commemorate it.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but why then hold it at all? Because even in the original 2001 Durban Conference, the original Secretary General refused to adopt the approved resolution as is over quote-unquote horrible anti-Semitism that was present. So again, why continue to hold it at all? Why have 3 more iterations after the first failure?
Simply because the pressure that still the Palestinians, it's like the tail wagging the dog. The Palestinians are putting the pressure on the Arab countries, the Arab groups, about 22 of them at the United Nations. And they put the pressure on the Islamic group, which is You add together, it's 57 countries. And they put the pressure on what used to be the non-aligned countries. Most of them are not very affluent and not very democratic. And they are the ones who are being promised, whether it's through money or kinds, to go their way to this conflict and to condemn Israel. They do it just because of Palestinian and Arab and Muslim pressure. They don't do it because they want to do it. Many of these countries that participate in this conference have very good relations with Israel, and they get a lot of aid, technical aid, technological aid from Israel. If you look at those countries that did not participate, that boycotted, the 33 countries, they are the decent countries, but they're also independently behaving, conducting themselves countries that are not as the poorer countries dependent upon the Muslim or Arab markets or Arab world. So basically, it's something which has, unfortunately, it has no significance in the diplomatic arena. It does not harm Israel's foreign policies and foreign relations with countries in the world. And today, actually, we enjoy the best situation where we have more embassies abroad than ever before, more than 100 or 106. However, it does become very detrimental when it comes to BDS and all the actions against Israel, whether it's in campuses in the United States or whether it is in Europe within all kinds of labor movements and unions, worker unions. This is the problem. BDS and anti-Semitism against Israel and trying to separate anti-Semitism from anti-Zionism, which of course is one and the same, started in Durban 20 years ago, and we have reaped these sour grapes throughout the last 20 years.
All right. Ambassador Dani Ayalon, it's been a pleasure to speak with you again. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
In other news, after 7 years of relative silence, Israel and Sweden back on speaking terms. Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid announcing that he spoke with his Swedish counterpart Ann Linde on Monday this week, and the two reportedly discussing commitments to Israel's security, as well as Israel's participation at the Malmö International Forum on Holocaust Remembrance and Combating Anti-Semitism, an event scheduled for October 13 this year. Above all else, though, this contact is the first between the two nations on such a high level since 2014. That year, Sweden became the first European country to officially recognize a Palestinian state, despite repeatedly failed negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians. Israel at the time responding by recalling its envoy from Stockholm and blocking Swedish officials from visitation, despite their repeated requests. Then, angering Israeli officials further, after coming into office in 2019, Linde refused to denounce the BDS movement as illegitimate and nonviolent. She's since qualified her statement, however, adding that she does not support the BDS movement, but does support citizens' rights to engage in BDS as a form of protest. Israel, on the other hand, while apparently forgiving Sweden's position, retaining a very different perspective, that the BDS movement is anti-Semitic at its core, and that it holds the stated goal of completely eliminating Israel by any means necessary. All right, our final topic tonight, September 21 is Annual International Peace Day, and the UN General Assembly declaring it as a day marked by strengthening the ideals of peace through 24 hours of nonviolence and ceasefire. But beyond just not attacking one another, many organizations are working to actively foster new relationships. Organizations like Elitzur, Geneva World Peace, Chess for All, and Sharaka, which banded together to host an International Peace Day chess tournament. Joining me with more, Director of Communications and Global Affairs with the Sharaka-NGO, Major in the Reserves Dan Pfefferman, and Lior Eisenberg, CEO of Chess for All. Thank you both so much for joining us. Now, Major, I'm going to start with you. How did this come about?
Oh, this was a fantastic initiative. Lior at Chess for All, Shachmat Lekol in Hebrew, approached us and said he'd love to partner with us on this Chess for Solidarity event. And of course, that's what our organization Sharaka, which means partnership in Arabic, is all about, bringing together peoples from Israel and all over the Arab world. And it connected very well with Lior's vision of bringing people together from around the world through chess. And so we gladly partnered with him and in putting on this fantastic event.
Lior, of course, as the CEO of Chess for All, of course, chess is always on your mind. But how did you get the idea to incorporate Peace Day with this chess tournament?
Of course, this year was a remarkable year of 5 peace agreements, relations agreements that were signed by Israel this year. We are the first in the world in signing so many relations agreements this year. And, every year this event comes to be an event that used as a platform sometimes for Palestinians initiatives and organizations and such. And I wanted to do a Israeli solidarity event that promotes solidarity. And Sharaka is a great partner because all that they are doing all over the year in order to connect between people, in order to connect between organizations from the Gulf and from Israel. And we are looking at chess also as a sports with added value. And we initiated the Chess for Solidarity initiative that already brought together something like 6,000 players from all over the world, including from the Arab countries. And,
I wanted to ask if I could bring both of you in. How many participants, from where? Were there any maybe notable participants or international superstar grandmasters who maybe participated, anything like that?
Yes, there were more than 600 players. Wow. Including players from Iran and from Bangladesh and from Saudi Arabia and many countries that don't have diplomatic relations with Israel. And we had grandmasters. It's not only a chess diplomacy initiative, it's also chess. And there are many grandmasters and best players from all over the world that are playing and they are earning money from it. And it's great also for beginners and also for players that are professional players.
So, Major, I want to come back to you. Who won? What are people maybe saying now that the event has ended? What have been some of the reactions, and what's next?
Well, Lior can update on who won. I believe it was someone from India or Bangladesh.
Azerbaijan.
I'm sorry about that. There were a few different categories, so I got confused, but it was really incredible. People from over 70 countries from all over the Middle East and well beyond playing in this Israeli organized and sponsored chess event. An Israeli judge, an Iraqi judge were there, and it was incredible. We're looking to promote and help support any kind of such initiatives that are bringing people together over positive things. And Lior helped bring to us chess diplomacy, as we're going to call it. And sky's the limit for what we can accomplish in this new Jewish year. A lot of exciting things lie ahead.
All right. Well, I just want to say congratulations again. And it is such an amazing event that I was really happy to learn more about and to have you guys discuss with us. Thank you both so much for joining us again today.
Thank you so much.
All right, now let's take a look at the weather forecast. In the north by Katzrin, you can expect warm showers tonight with lows of about 70 Fahrenheit or 21 degrees Celsius. But the rest of the country should be warm, clear, and sunny with highs tomorrow averaging 85 Fahrenheit or 25 degrees Celsius. And now, before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral here in Israel. Here we're at the Kotel, or the Western Wall, where Jews are celebrating Sukkot, chanting the Birkat HaKohanim, an amazing annual celebration. All right, that is it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.21 shekels to the American dollar and 2.5 shekels to the Canadian dollar. And finally, for the latest updates and news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as to our newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Aaron Porras. Be well, happy holidays, and thank you so much for watching.